I came across this old tweet of mine, or this tweet of mine from that time period, which was like, it was like, kind of going to your own eulogy, watching people say all these great things about you, and just like unbelievable support from people I love and care about. That was really nice. That whole weekend, I kind of like felt, with one big exception, I felt like a great deal of love and very little hate. Even though it felt like I have no idea what's happening and what's going to happen here, and this feels really bad. And there were definitely times I thought it was going to be like one of the worst things to ever happen for AI safety. Well, I also think I'm happy that it happened relatively early. I thought at some point between when OpenAI started and when we created AGI, there was going to be something crazy and explosive that happened. But there may be more crazy and explosive things still to happen. It still, I think, helped us build up some resilience and be ready for more challenges in the future.
But the thing you had a sense that you would experience is some kind of power struggle.
The road to AGI should be a giant power struggle. Like the world should, not should. I expect that to be the case.
And so you have to go through that, as, like you said, iterate as often as possible, in figuring out how to have a board structure, how to have organization, how to have the kind of people that you're working with, how to communicate all that in order to de-escalate the power struggle as much as possible.
Yeah.
Pacify it.
But at this point, it feels, like something that was in the past that was really unpleasant and really difficult and painful. But we're back to work and things are so busy and so intense that I don't spend a lot of time thinking about it. There was a time after, there was like this fugue state for kind of like the month after, maybe 45 days after, I was just sort of like drifting through the days. I was so out of it. I was feeling so down.
Just on a personal psychological level.
Yeah. Really painful. And hard to like have to keep running OpenAI in the middle of that. I just wanted to like crawl into a cave and kind of recover for a while. But, now it's like we're just back to working on the mission.
Well, it's still useful to go back there and reflect on board structures, on power dynamics, on how companies are run, the tension between research and product development and money and all this kind of stuff, so that you, who have a very high potential of building AGI, would do so in a slightly more organized, less dramatic way in the future. So there's value there to go, both the personal psychological aspects of you as a leader and also just the board structure and all this kind of messy stuff.
Definitely learned a lot about structure and incentives and what we need out of a board. And I think it is valuable that this happened now in some sense. I think this is probably not like the last high stress moment of OpenAI, but it was quite a high stress moment. Like company very nearly got destroyed. And we think a lot about many of the other things we've got to get right for AGI, but thinking about how to build a resilient org and how to build a structure that will stand up to like a lot of pressure in the world, which I expect more and more as we get closer. I think that's super important.
Do you have a sense of how deep and rigorous the deliberation process by the board was? Like, can you shine some light on just human dynamics involved in situations like this? Was it just a few conversations and all of a sudden it escalates and why don't we fire Sam kind of thing?
I think the board members are well-meaning people on the whole. And I believe that in stressful situations where people feel time pressure or whatever, people understandably make suboptimal decisions. And I think one of the challenges for OpenAI will be we're going to have a board and a team that are good at operating under pressure.
Do you think the board had too much power?
I think boards are supposed to have a lot of power. But one of the things that we did see is in most corporate structures, boards are usually answerable to shareholders. There's sometimes people have like super voting shares or whatever. In this case, and I think one of the things with our structure that we maybe should have thought about more than we did is that the board of a nonprofit has, unless you put other rules in place, like quite a lot of power. They don't really answer to anyone but themselves. And there's ways in which that's good, but what we'd really like is for the board of OpenAI to like answer to the world as a whole, as much as that's a practical thing.
So there's a new board announced.
Yeah.
There's, I guess, a new smaller board at first, and now there's a new final board.
Not a final board yet. We've added some. We'll add more.
Added some. Okay. What is fixed in the new one that was perhaps broken in the previous one?
The old board sort of got smaller over the course of about a year. It was 9, and then it went down to 6. And then we couldn't agree on who to add. And the board also, I think, didn't have a lot of experienced board members. And a lot of the new board members at OpenAI have more experience as board members. I think that'll help.
It's been criticized, some of the people that are added to the board. I heard a lot of people criticizing the addition of Larry Summers, for example. What's the process of selecting the board like? What's involved in that?
So Brett and Larry were kind of decided in the heat of the moment over this like very tense weekend. And that weekend was like a real roller coaster. It was like a lot of ups and downs. And we were trying to agree on new board members that both sort of the executive team here and the old board members felt would be reasonable. Larry was actually one of their suggestions, the old board members. Brett, I think I had even previous to that weekend suggested, but he was busy and didn't want to do it. And then we really needed help in wood. We talked about a lot of other people too, but that was, I felt like if I was going to come back, I needed new board members. I didn't think I could work with the old board again in the same configuration, although we then decided, and I'm grateful that Adam would stay. But we wanted to get to, we considered various configurations, decided we wanted to get to a board of 3, and had to find 2 new board members over the course of sort of a short period of time. So those were decided honestly without, that's like you kind of do that on the battlefield. You don't have time to design a rigorous process then. For new board members, and new board members will add going forward, we have some criteria that we think are important for the board to have, different expertise that we want the board to have. Unlike hiring an executive where you need them to do one role well, the board needs to do a whole role of kind of governance and thoughtfulness well. And so one thing that Brett says, which I really like, is that, we want to hire board members in slates, not as individuals one at a time. And, thinking about a group of people that will bring nonprofit expertise at running companies, sort of good legal and governance expertise. That's kind of what we've tried to optimize for.
So is technical savvy important for the individual board members?
Not for every board member, but for certainly some you need that. That's part of what the board needs to do.
So, the interesting thing that people probably don't understand about OpenAI, I certainly don't, is like all the details of running the business. When they think about the board, given the drama, they think about you, they think about like if you reach AGI or you reach some of these incredibly impactful products and you build them and deploy them, what's the conversation with the board like? And they kind of think, all right, what's the right squad to have in that kind of situation to deliberate?
Look, I think you definitely need some technical experts there. And then you need some people who are like, how can we deploy this in a way that will help people in the world the most, and people who have a very different perspective. I think a mistake that you or I might make is to think that only the technical understanding matters. And that's definitely part of the conversation you want that board to have. But there's a lot more about how that's going to just like impact society and people's lives that you really want represented in there too.
And you're just are you looking at the track record of people, or you're just having conversations?
Track record is a big deal. You of course have a lot of conversations, but there's some roles where I kind of totally ignore track record and just look at slope, kind of ignore the y-intercept.
Thank you for making it mathematical for the audience.
For a board member, like I do care much more about the y-intercept. Like I think there is something deep to say about track record there, and experience is sometimes very hard to replace.
Do you try to fit a polynomial function or exponential one to the track record?
That's not that. An analogy doesn't carry that far.
All right. You mentioned some of the low points that weekend. What were some of the low points psychologically for you? Did you consider going to the Amazon jungle and just taking ayahuasca and disappearing forever? Or,
I mean, there's so many low. Like it was a very bad period of time. There were great high points too. Like, my phone was just like sort of nonstop blowing up with nice messages from people I work with every day, people I hadn't talked to in a decade. I didn't get to like appreciate that as much as I should have because I was just like in the middle of this firefight, but that was really nice. But on the whole, it was like a very painful weekend, and also just like it was like a battle fought in public to a surprising degree. And that was extremely exhausting to me, much more than I expected. I think fights are generally exhausting, but this one really was. The board did this Friday afternoon. I really couldn't get much in the way of answers, but I also was just like, well, the board gets to do this. And so I'm going to think for a little bit about what I want to do, but I'll try to find the blessing in disguise here. And I was like, well, my current job at OpenAI it was like to like run a decently sized company at this point. And the thing I'd always liked the most was just getting to like work with the researchers. And I was like, yeah, I can just go do like a very focused AGI research effort. And I got excited about that. It didn't even occur to me at the time to like possibly that this was all going to get undone. This was like Friday afternoon.
Oh, so you've accepted the death
very
of this
quickly, very quickly. Like within, I went through like a little period of confusion and rage, but very quickly. And by Friday night, I was like talking to people about what was going to be next. And I was excited about that. I think it was Friday evening for the first time that I heard from the exec team here, which is like, hey, we're going to like fight this. And, we think, well, whatever. And then I went to bed just still being like, okay, excited, like onward.
Were you able to sleep?
Not a lot. It was one of the weird things was this like period of 4.5 days where sort of didn't sleep much, didn't eat much, and still kind of had like a surprising amount of energy. You learn like a weird thing about adrenaline in wartime.
So you kind of accepted the death of this baby OpenAI.
And I was excited for the new thing. I was just like, okay, this was crazy, but whatever.
It's a very good coping mechanism.
And then Saturday morning, two of the board members called and said, hey, we didn't mean to destabilize things. We don't want to destroy a lot of value here. Can we talk about you coming back? And I immediately didn't want to do that, but I thought a little more, and I was like, well, I really care about the people here, the partners, shareholders, like I love this company. And so I thought about it and I was like, well, okay, but like, here's the stuff I would need. And then the most painful time of all was over the course of that weekend. I kept thinking and being told, and we all kept, not just me, like the whole team here kept thinking, while we were trying to like keep OpenAI stabilized while the whole world was trying to break it apart, people trying to recruit, whatever. We kept being told like, all right, we're almost done. We just need like a little bit more time. And it was this like very confusing state. And then Sunday evening, when again, like every few hours, I expected that we were going to be done and we're going to like figure out a way for me to return and things to go back to how they were. The board then appointed a new interim CEO. And then I was like, that feels really bad. That was the low point of the whole thing. I'll tell you something. It felt very painful, but I felt a lot of love that whole weekend. Mm-hmm. It was not, other than that one moment Sunday night, I would not characterize my emotions as anger or hate. But I really just I felt a lot of love from people towards people. It was painful, but it would the dominant emotion of the weekend was love, not hate.
You've spoken highly of Mira Murati, that she helped, especially, as you put in a tweet, in the quiet moments when it counts. Perhaps we could take a bit of a tangent. What do you admire about Mira?
Well, she did a great job during that weekend in a lot of chaos, but people often see leaders in the moment, in the crisis moments, good or bad. But a thing I really value in leaders is how people act on a boring Tuesday at 9:46 in the morning. Mm-hmm. And in just sort of the normal drudgery of the day-to-day. How someone shows up in a meeting, the quality of the decisions they make. That was what I meant about the quiet moments.
Meaning most of the work is done on a day by day, in a meeting by meeting, just be present and make great decisions.
Yeah, I mean, look, what you wanted to spend the last 20 minutes about, and I understand, is this one very dramatic weekend.
Yeah.
But that's not really what OpenAI is about. OpenAI is really about the other 7 years.
Well, yeah, human civilization is not about the invasion of the Soviet Union by Nazi Germany, but still that's something people focus on.
Very, very understandable.
It gives us an insight into human nature, the extremes of human nature, and perhaps some of the damage and some of the triumphs of human civilization can happen in those moments. So it's illustrative. Let me ask you about Ilya. Is he being held hostage in a secret nuclear facility?
No.
What about a regular secret facility?
No.
What about a nuclear non-secret facility?
Neither. Okay. Not that either.
I mean, this is becoming a meme at some point. You've known Ilya for a long time. He was obviously in part of this drama with the board and all that kind of stuff. What's your relationship with him now?
I love Ilya. I have tremendous respect for Ilya. I don't have anything I can say about his plans right now. That's a question for him. But I really hope we work together for certainly the rest of my career. He's a little bit younger than me. Maybe he works a little bit longer.
There's a meme that he saw something. He maybe saw AGI and that gave him a lot of worry internally. What did Ilya see?
Ilya has not seen AGI. None of us have seen AGI. We've not built AGI. I do think one of the many things that I really love about Ilya is he takes AGI and the safety concerns, broadly speaking, including things like the impact this is going to have on society, very seriously. And as we continue to make significant progress, Ilya is one of the people that I've spent the most time over the last couple of years talking about what this is going to mean, what we need to do to ensure we get it right, to ensure that we succeed at the mission. So Ilya did not see AGI, but Ilya is a credit to humanity in terms of how much he thinks and worries about making sure we get this right.
I've had a bunch of conversation with him in the past. I think when he talks about technology, he's always doing this long-term thinking type of thing. So he's not thinking about what this is going to be in a year. He's thinking about in 10 years.
Yeah.
Just thinking from first principles, okay, if this scales, what are the fundamentals here? Where's this going? And so that's a foundation for them thinking about all the other safety concerns and all that kind of stuff, which makes him a really fascinating human to talk with. Do you have any idea why he's been kind of quiet? Is it he's just doing some soul searching?
Again, I don't want to speak for Ilya. Mm-hmm. I think that you should ask him that. He's definitely a thoughtful guy. I kind of think of Ilya as always on a soul search in a really good way.
Yes. Yeah. Also, he appreciates the power of silence. Also, I'm told he can be a silly guy, which I've never seen that side of him.
It's very sweet when that happens.
I've never witnessed a silly Ilya, but I look forward to that as well.
I was at a dinner party with him recently, and he was playing with a puppy, and he was like in a very silly mood, very endearing, and I was thinking like, oh man, this is like not the side of the Ilya that the world sees the most.
So just to wrap up this whole saga, are you feeling good about the board structure,
Yes.
about all of this, and like where it's moving?
I feel great about the new board. In terms of the structure of OpenAI, one of the board's tasks is to look at that and see where we can make it more robust. We wanted to get new board members in place first, but we clearly learned a lesson about structure throughout this process. I don't have, I think, super deep things to say. It was a crazy, very painful experience. I think it was like a perfect storm of weirdness. It was like a preview for me of what's going to happen as the stakes get higher and higher, and the need that we have like robust governance structures and processes and people. I am kind of happy it happened when it did, but it was a shockingly painful thing to go through.
Did it make you be more hesitant in trusting people?
Yes.
Just on a personal level?
I think I'm like an extremely trusting person. I've always had a life philosophy of, like, don't worry about all of the paranoia. Don't worry about the edge cases. You get a little bit screwed in exchange for getting to live with your guard down. Mm-hmm. And this was so shocking to me. I was so caught off guard that it has definitely changed. And I really don't like this. It's definitely changed how I think about just like default trust of people and planning for the bad scenarios.
You got to be careful with that. Are you worried about becoming a little too cynical?
I'm not worried about becoming too cynical. I think I'm like the extreme opposite of a cynical person, but I'm worried about just becoming like less of a default trusting person.
I'm actually not sure which mode is best to operate in for a person who's developing AGI. Trusting or untrusting. It's an interesting journey you're on. But in terms of structure, see, I'm more interested on the human level. Like, how do you surround yourself with humans that are building cool shit, but also are making wise decisions? Because the more money you start making, the more power the thing has, the weirder people get.
I think you could make all kinds of comments about the board members and the level of trust I should have had there or how I should have done things differently. But in terms of the team here, I think you'd have to give me a very good grade on that one. And I have just enormous gratitude and trust and respect for the people that I work with every day. And I think being surrounded with people like that is really important.
Our mutual friend Elon sued OpenAI. What to you is the essence of what he's criticizing? To what degree does he have a point? To what degree is he wrong?
I don't know what it's really about. We started off just thinking we were going to be a research lab and having no idea about how this technology was going to go. It's hard to, because it was only 7 or 8 years ago, it's hard to go back and really remember what it was like then. But this was before language models were a big deal. This was before we had any idea about an API or selling access to a chatbot. It was before we had any idea we were going to productize it all. So we're just going to try to do research, and we don't really know what we're going to do with that. I think with many fundamentally new things, you start fumbling through the dark and you make some assumptions, most of which turn out to be wrong. And then it became clear that we were going to need to do different things and also have huge amounts more capital. So we said, okay, well, the structure doesn't quite work for that. How do we patch the structure? And then you patch it again, and you end up with something that does look kind of eyebrow raising, to say the least. But we got here gradually with, I think, reasonable decisions at each point along the way. And doesn't mean I wouldn't do it totally differently if we could go back now with an oracle, but you don't get the oracle at the time. But anyway, in terms of what Elon's real motivations here are, I don't know.
To the degree you remember, what was the response that OpenAI gave in the blog post? Can you summarize it?
Oh, we just said Elon said this set of things. Here's our characterization, or here's the sort of, not our characterization, here's the characterization of how this went down. We tried to not make it emotional and just sort of say, like, here's the history.
I do think there's a degree of mischaracterization from Elon here about one of the points you just made, which is the degree of uncertainty you had at the time. You guys are a bunch of a small group of researchers crazily talking about AGI when everybody's laughing at that thought.
Wasn't that long ago Elon was crazily talking about launching rockets?
Yeah.
When people were laughing at that thought. So I think he'd have more empathy for this.
I mean, I do think that there's personal stuff here, that there was a split, that OpenAI and a lot of amazing people here chose to part ways with Elon. So there's a personal
Elon chose to part ways.
Can you describe that exactly? The choosing to part ways?
He thought OpenAI was going to fail. He wanted total control to sort of turn it around. We wanted to keep going in the direction that now has become OpenAI. He also wanted Tesla to be able to build an AGI effort. At various times, he wanted to make OpenAI into a for-profit company that he could have control of or have it merge with Tesla. We didn't want to do that, and he decided to leave, which that's fine.
So you're saying, and that's one of the things that the blog post says, is that he wanted OpenAI to be basically acquired by Tesla.
Yeah.
In the same way that, or maybe something similar, or maybe something more dramatic than the partnership with Microsoft.
My memory is the proposal was just get acquired by Tesla and have Tesla have full control over it. I'm pretty sure that's what it was.
So what is the word open in OpenAI mean to Elon at the time? Ilya has talked about this in the email exchanges and all this kind of stuff. What does it mean to you at the time? What does it mean to you now?
I would definitely pick speaking of going back with an oracle, I'd pick a different name. One of the things that I think OpenAI is doing that is the most important of everything that we're doing is putting powerful technology in the hands of people for free as a public good. We don't run ads on our free version. We don't monetize it in other ways. We just say as part of our mission, we want to put increasingly powerful tools in the hands of people for free and get them to use them. And I think that kind of open is really important to our mission. I think if you give people great tools and teach them to use them, or don't even teach them, they'll figure it out, and let them go build an incredible future for each other with that, that's a big deal. So if we can keep putting free or low cost, or free and low cost, powerful AI tools out in the world, I think that's a huge deal for how we fulfill the mission. Open source or not, yeah, I think we should open source some stuff and not other stuff. It does become this religious battle line where nuance is hard to have, but I think nuance is the right answer.
So he said, change your name to Closed AI and I'll drop the lawsuit. I mean, is it going to become this battleground in the land of memes about
I
the
think
name?
that speaks to the seriousness with which Elon means the lawsuit. And that's an astonishing thing to say, I think.
Well, I don't think the lawsuit, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think the lawsuit is legally serious. It's more to make a point about the future of AGI and the company that's currently leading the way. So,
look, Grok had not open sourced anything until people pointed out it was a little bit hypocritical, and then he announced that Grok will open source things this week. I don't think open source versus not is what this is really about for him.
Well, we'll talk about open source and not. I do think maybe criticizing the competition is great. Just talking a little shit, that's great. But friendly competition versus I personally hate lawsuits.
Yeah, look, I think this whole thing is unbecoming of a builder, and I respect Elon as one of the great builders of our time. And I know he knows what it's like to have haters attack him, and it makes me extra sad he's doing it to us.
Yeah, he's one of the greatest builders of all time, potentially the greatest builder of all time.
It makes me sad. And I think it makes a lot of people sad. There's a lot of people who've really looked up to him for a long time. And I said, in some interview or something that I missed the old Elon, and the number of messages I got being that exactly encapsulates how I feel.
I think he should just win. he should just make Grok beat GPT, and then GPT beats Grok, and it's just a competition. And it's beautiful for everybody. But on the question of open source, do you think there's a lot of companies playing with this idea? It's quite interesting. I would say Meta, surprisingly, has led the way on this, or at least took the first step in the game of chess of really open sourcing the model. Of course, it's not the state of the art model, but open sourcing Llama. And Google is flirting with the idea of open sourcing a smaller version. What are the pros and cons of open sourcing? Have you played around with this idea?
Yeah, I think there is definitely a place for open source models, particularly smaller models that people can run locally. I think there's huge demand for. I think there will be some open source models. There will be some closed source models. It won't be unlike other ecosystems in that way.
I listened to All In podcast talking about this lawsuit and all that kind of stuff, and they were more concerned about the precedent of going from nonprofit to this cap for profit. What precedent this sets for other startups? Is that something?
I would heavily discourage any startup that was thinking about starting as a nonprofit and adding a for-profit arm later. I'd heavily discourage them from doing that. I don't think we'll set a precedent here.
Okay, so most startups should go just
for sure. And again, if we knew what was going to happen, we would have done that too.
Well, in theory, if you dance beautifully here, you could. There's some tax incentives or whatever. But
I don't think that's how most people think about these things.
So it's not possible to save a lot of money for a startup if you do it this way.
No, I think there's laws that would make that pretty difficult.
Where do you hope this goes with Elon? This tension, this dance, where do you hope this? If we go 1, 2, 3 years from now, your relationship with him on a personal level too, friendship, friendly competition, just all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I really respect Elon. And I hope that years in the future we have an amicable relationship.
Yeah, I hope you guys have an amicable relationship this month. And just compete and win and explore these ideas together. I do suppose there's competition for talent or whatever, but it should be friendly competition. Just build cool shit. And Elon is pretty good at building cool shit, but so are you. So speaking of cool shit, Sora, there's a million questions I could ask. First of all, it's amazing. It truly is amazing on a product level, but also just on a philosophical level. So let me just technical/philosophical ask, what do you think it understands about the world more or less than GPT-4, for example? The world model, when you train on these patches versus language tokens.
I think all of these models understand something more about the world model than most of us give them credit for. And because they're also very clear things they just don't understand or don't get right, it's easy to look at the weaknesses, see through the veil and say, this is all fake. But it's not all fake. It's just some of it works and some of it doesn't work. I remember when I started first watching Sora videos and I would see a person walk in front of something for a few seconds and occlude it and then walk away and the same thing was still there. I was like, this is pretty good. Mm-hmm. Or there's examples where the underlying physics looks so well represented over a lot of steps in a sequence. It's this is quite impressive. But fundamentally, these models are just getting better, and that will keep happening. If you look at the trajectory from DALL-E 1 to 2 to 3 to Sora, there are a lot of people that were dunked on each version, saying it can't do this, it can't do that, and look at it now.
So, well, the thing you just mentioned is kind of with occlusions, is basically modeling the physics, the three-dimensional physics of the world sufficiently well to capture those kinds of things.
Well,
maybe you can tell me, in order to deal with occlusions, what does the world model need to?
Yeah, so what I would say is it's doing something to deal with occlusions really well. Would I represent that it has a great underlying 3D model of the world? It's a little bit more of a stretch.
But can you get there through just these kinds of two-dimensional training data approaches?
It looks like this approach is going to go surprisingly far. I don't want to speculate too much about what limits it will surmount and which it won't, but
what are some interesting limitations of the system that you've seen? I mean, there's been some fun ones you've posted.
There's all kinds of ones. I mean, like, cats sprouting an extra limb at random points in a video. Like, pick what you want, but there's still a lot of problems, a lot of weaknesses.
Do you think that's a fundamental flaw of the approach? Or is it just, bigger model or better, like, technical details or better data, more data is going to solve those the cat sprouting extra
I would say yes to both. Like, I think there is something about the approach which just seems to feel different from how we think and learn and whatever. And then also, I think it'll get better with scale.
Like I mentioned, LLMs have tokens, text tokens, and Sora has visual patches. So it converts all visual data, diverse kinds of visual data, videos and images into patches. Is the training to the degree you can say fully self-supervised, or is there some manual labeling going on? Like, what's the involvement of humans in all this?
I mean, without saying anything specific about the Sora approach, we use lots of human data in our work.
But not internet scale data. So lots of humans. Lots is a complicated word, Sam.
I think lots is a fair word in this case.
But it doesn't, because to me, lots, like, listen, I'm an introvert, and when I hang out with like 3 people, that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
Like 4 people, that's a lot. But I suppose you mean more than
3 people work on labeling the data for these models, yeah.
Okay. All right. But fundamentally, there's a lot of self-supervised learning, because what you mentioned in the technical report is internet scale data. That's another beautiful, it's like poetry. So it's a lot of data that's not human label. It's like, it's self-supervised in that way.
Yeah.
And then the question is how much data is there on the internet that could be used in this, that is conducive to this kind of self-supervised way? If only we knew the details of the self-supervised. Have you considered opening it up a little more details?
We have. You mean for Sora specifically?
Sora specifically, because it's so interesting that, like, can the same magic of LLMs now start moving towards visual data? And what does that take to do that?
I mean, it looks to me like yes, but we have more work to do.
Sure. What are the dangers? Why are you concerned about releasing the system? What are some possible dangers of this?
I mean, frankly speaking, one thing we have to do before releasing the system is just like get it to work at a level of efficiency that will deliver the scale people are going to want from this. So that I don't want to like downplay that. And there's still a ton of work to do there. But, you can imagine like issues with deepfakes, misinformation. Like, we try to be a thoughtful company about what we put out into the world. And it doesn't take much thought to think about the ways this can go badly.
There's a lot of tough questions here. You're dealing in a very tough space. Do you think training AI should be or is fair use under copyright law?
I think the question behind that question is, do people who create valuable data deserve to have some way that they get compensated for use of it? And that, I think the answer is yes. I don't know yet what the answer is. People have proposed a lot of different things. We've tried some different models. But, if I'm like an artist, for example, A, I would like to be able to opt out of people generating art in my style. And B, if they do generate art in my style, I'd like to have some economic model associated with that.
Yeah, it's that transition from CDs to Napster to Spotify. I have to figure out some kind of model.
The model changes, but people have got to get paid.
Well, there should be some kind of incentive, if we zoom out even more, for humans to keep doing cool shit.
Everything I worry about, humans are going to do cool shit, and society is going to find some way to reward it. That seems pretty hardwired. We want to create, we want to be useful, we want to like achieve status in whatever way. That's not going anywhere, I don't think.
But the reward might not be monetary, financial. It might be like fame and celebration of other cool
maybe financial in some other way. Again, I don't think we've seen like the last evolution of how the economic system is going to work.
Yeah, but artists and creators are worried. When they see Sora, they're like, holy shit.
Sure, artists were also super worried when photography came out.
Yeah.
And then photography became a new art form and people made a lot of money taking pictures. And I think things like that will keep happening. People will use the new tools in new ways.
If we just look on YouTube or something like this, how much of that will be using Sora like AI generated content, do you think, in the next 5 years?
People talk about like how many jobs is AI going to do in 5 years. And the framework that people have is what percentage of current jobs are just going to be totally replaced by some AI doing the job. The way I think about it is not what percent of jobs AI will do, but what percent of tasks will AI do and over what time horizon. So if you think of all of the like 5-second tasks in the economy, the 5-minute tasks, the 5-hour tasks, maybe even the 5-day tasks, how many of those can AI do? And I think that's a way more interesting, impactful, important question than how many jobs AI can do, because it is a tool that will work at increasing levels of sophistication and over longer and longer time horizons for more and more tasks, and let people operate at a higher level of abstraction. So maybe people are way more efficient at the job they do. And at some point, that's not just a quantitative change, but it's a qualitative one too, about the kinds of problems you can keep in your head. I think that for videos on YouTube, it'll be the same. Many videos, maybe most of them, will use AI tools in the production, but they'll still be fundamentally driven by a person thinking about it, putting it together, doing parts of it, sort of directing and running it.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, it's scary, but it's interesting to think about. I tend to believe that humans like to watch other humans or other human.
Humans really care about other humans a lot.
Yeah. If there's a cooler thing that's better than a human, humans care about that for like 2 days and then they go back to humans.
That seems very deeply wired.
It's the whole chess thing.
Yeah.
But now let's everybody keep playing chess. And let's ignore the elephant in the room that humans are really bad at chess relative to AI systems.
We still run races and cars are much faster. I mean, there's like a lot of examples.
Yeah. And maybe it'll just be tooling like in the Adobe suite type of way where you can just make videos much easier and all that kind of stuff. Listen, I hate being in front of the camera. If I can figure out a way to not be in front of the camera, I would love it. Unfortunately, it'll take a while. Like that, generating faces, it's getting there. But generating faces in video format is tricky when it's specific people versus generic people. Let me ask you about GPT-4. There's so many questions. First of all, also amazing. It's looking back, it'll probably be this kind of historic pivotal moment with 3, 5, and 4 with ChatGPT.
Maybe 5 will be the pivotal moment. I don't know. Hard to say that looking forwards.
We never know. That's the annoying thing about the future. It's hard to predict. But for me, looking back, GPT-4, ChatGPT is pretty damn impressive, like historically impressive. So allow me to ask, what's been the most impressive capabilities of GPT-4 to you and GPT-4 Turbo?
I think it kind of sucks.
Typical human also. Gotten used to an awesome thing.
No, I think it is an amazing thing. But relative to where we need to get to and where I believe we will get to, at the time of like GPT-3, people were like, oh, this is amazing. This is this like marvel of technology. And it was. But, now we have GPT-4 and you look at GPT-3 and you're like, that's unimaginably horrible. I expect that the delta between 5 and 4 will be the same as between 4 and 3. And I think it is our job to live a few years in the future and remember that the tools we have now are going to kind of suck looking backwards at them. And that's how we make sure the future is better.
What are the most glorious ways in that GPT-4 sucks? Meaning,
what are the best things it can do?
What are the best things it can do, and the limits of those best things that allow you to say it sucks, therefore gives you an inspiration and hope for the future?
One thing I've been using it for more recently is sort of like a brainstorming partner.
Yep.
And
I love it for that.
There's a glimmer of something amazing in there. I don't think it gets when people talk about it, what it does, they're like, it helps me code more productively. It helps me write more faster and better. It helps me, translate from this language to another. All these like amazing things, but there's something about the like kind of creative brainstorming partner. I need to come up with a name for this thing. I need to like think about this problem in a different way. I'm not sure what to do here. That I think like gives a glimpse of something I hope to see more of. One of the other things that you can see like a very small glimpse of is when it can help on longer horizon tasks. Break down something into multiple steps, maybe like execute some of those steps, search the internet, write code, whatever, put that together. When that works, which is not very often, it's like very magical.
The iterative back and forth with a human. Well, it works a lot for me. What do you mean?
Iterative back and forth with a human, it can get more often, but when it can go do like a 10-step problem on its own.
Oh.
It doesn't work for that too often. Sometimes.
At multiple layers of abstraction, or do you mean just sequential?
Both, like, to break it down and then do things at different layers of abstraction and put them together. Look, I don't want to like downplay the accomplishment of GPT-4, but I don't want to overstate it either. And I think this point that we are on an exponential curve, we will look back relatively soon at GPT-4 like we look back at GPT-3 now.
That said, I mean, ChatGPT was a transition to where people like started to believe it. There is an uptick of believing, not internally at OpenAI, perhaps. There's believers here, but when you think,
and in that sense, I do think it'll be a moment where a lot of the world went from not believing to believing. That was more about the ChatGPT interface than and by the interface and product, I also mean the post-training of the model and how we tune it to be helpful to you and how to use it than the underlying model itself.
How much of those two, each of those things are important? The underlying model and the RLHF or something of that nature that tunes it to be more compelling to the human, more effective and productive for the human.
I mean, they're both super important, but the RLHF, the post-training step, the little wrapper of things that, from a compute perspective, little wrapper of things that we do on top of the base model, even though it's a huge amount of work. Mm-hmm. That's really important, to say nothing of the product that we build around it. In some sense, like, we did have to do two things. We had to invent the underlying technology, and then we had to figure out how to make it into a product people would love, which is not just about the actual product work itself, but this whole other step of how you align it and make it useful.